PC sales are falling.
What?
Yeah, it's crazy. Tablets are rising. Android is becoming dominant, right? I think I read a Wall Street Journal article that they have 80% of the smartphone market a couple days ago. But iOS monetizes well. We monetize 2 to 3 times better. We learned that today. BlackBerry putting itself up for sale recently. Mozilla recently putting out a mobile OS. Old news and news. And then there's all this buzz
They
about
took the listing off and then put it back up, so it looked.
So it's an interesting market. A lot of dynamics going on here. You know, kind of like what's next. I want everyone to dig deep into their crystal ball and don't stick to your party line. Everyone has sort of a vested interest going down the line of where they want this to go, but take a step out from that. Look into your crystal ball and look at where we'll go next. And if anyone wants to just start off with that, you know, is HTML5 the I'm gonna just pick on you because you haven't spoken yet.
Okay, no problem. So what's next? Probably from a user perspective, technology is not important. But it expects the ease of use, good user experience, fast graphics, everything working like that. Privacy is not anymore, you know, a habit. No one takes care of it. So probably the next revolution is not going to be in the devices. It's going to be in people. In how people interact with the technology and how they interact with other people and how, you know, this combination between technology and people are going to be evolving. Devices are there, you know, technology is there. Everybody can use that. Nobody is pretty much concerned about how good or how bad is it, as soon as it is easy to use and can fulfill the daily, you know, duties. From that point, I think that people will become more self-concerned.
You want to just go down the line and kind of do the crystal ball thing here? Where does this go? What does the hardware become less important?
So I actually think the data that these things are collecting and the sensors around them are going to be the next big thing. This whole movement towards big data, not to talk about Telefonica, but we have a big data initiative which is you know, collects data that exists today in the networks, and for example helps Best Buy work out where they build their next store, or helps San Francisco Airport work out where how consumers are traveling around the airport based on cellular data. We had a really good panel on Monday with Mobile Monday and Larry and some other folks, and the topic was around wearables. I think this space of wearables and then how you interconnect the data from your mobile and the wearables and the cloud create some scenarios that in 12 months we'll look back on today and just wouldn't have thought were possible.
Interesting. Chris, you wanna?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really solidly lined up. Like, we should talk because I got a study that we're doing on data. I actually think we don't even have a language for data yet. You know, big data is this moniker of, okay, I've got this unstructured data, so we just call it big data. But, you know, data means something different to everybody that looks at it and interprets it. How Telefonica would look at it from a carrier perspective is be very different than how an OEM would look at it, or how somebody with a particular cloud service would look at it. And I agree. I mean, the wearables seem between Google Glass and everybody's got an armband nowadays, and I've been on this bend for a little bit, and I think we're getting a lot closer to really eliminating that man-machine interface. I've used some mind control devices to actually control PCs and technology, and it is a little scary and a little mind-blowing, you know, no pun intended. And I think the generation coming up has no fear of that. I think if you look at previous generations, we've always viewed technology as something to be cautious about, be careful about, right? We all read Tolkien, you know, we've all seen these things, but the generation coming up now, it's just part of their lives. I mean, every 2-year-old on the planet in a developed nation has touched an iPhone or some touch device, right? We've seen those videos of babies touching magazines and wondering why the pictures don't move, because you actually have to turn the page, right? So, you know, to me, those are the social factors that all of a sudden start to create this paradigm where those consumers start to demand that integration.
So I'm Abe Elias. I'm the CTO and founder at Sancha, and we make HTML5 frameworks. So that's pretty much it, what we do. you know, as far as where the future goes, I continue to see the devices becoming more personal, in the sense that, you know, I'm an iPhone user, I'm a BlackBerry user, I'm a Galaxy S user. And as a result of that, developers are going to have to develop for all these different platforms that exist out there. And how do they do that? So we believe strongly that HTML5 is the highest common denominator on how you're able to develop an application across all these different platforms that are going to emerge. And with the volatility of the market share, you know, back in 2009 or so, if you said, you know, I'm building an Android app, you know, they didn't have, you know, as much dominance that they have today. So, and that can change again, you know, in 2-3 years of time. You know, you have to be able as a developer to plan for that. And we have organizations and businesses who are iOS only shops. And we had a conference back in Orlando where, you know, Genentech has, you know, 40,000 odd devices, all iOS devices. They're not building on Cappuccino and Objective-C. They're building on HTML5 and Sencha. And the reason for that is that they don't know what 2 years down the line holds. And they don't want to make a huge investment in a proprietary technology code base and then feel like that code is stranded. So what HTML5 gives us is future-proof. We know that an application that's written today is going to work pretty much cross-platform, you know, 2 years from now. And I think that's where the industry goes as more platforms continue to emerge and developers have, you know, the desire to, you know, build applications for them and have that reach, that they have to find some commonality on how they build those applications. And HTML5, in our opinion, is the best way to do that.
I agree with everything that's been said. I think there's a couple things that sort of stand out for me. And I'm just thinking about this from the perspective of my everyday use of these devices and so on. I want to get to one device. I'm tired of carrying around a laptop and a tablet and my phone in my bag. I want to get to one device. You know what I'm
that big though?
Yeah, well, I'm almost there now. I mean, I go home and I throw this thing into the dock, which has got a little HDMI connector on it, and I watch movies on my 106-inch screen, you know, that are being streamed from my phone. So I want to get to one device, and I think that all the stuff that's inside the device today, the processing capability, the memory, and all that kind of stuff, it's good enough for me to use it as a replacement for everything else that I use if I can find ways to interface it with the rest of the real world around me. So that's one thing that I personally would like to see. And I think a lot of people would like to see it. I find myself doing things like, you know, I haven't opened the laptop all day. And 6 months ago it would have been, out comes the Mac as soon as I need to do some email because I want a real keyboard. Well, the keyboard on this is getting to the point where it's good enough that I can do 80% of the email that I do during a day. If I need to sit down and write a long document, yeah, I need
Is the
physical
keyboard getting better, or are you getting used to it?
The keyboard learns, so it's learning me. I've taught it to swear because there's an anti-profanity filter on it, and if you know me, around my team, it's a big joke inside of meetings. So somebody will say, "Holy shot! Did you do that again?" Yeah, duck you. Anyway, so that's one of them. And then the other thing that I would really like to see is.
Hey, do you want to take just a riff on the last one? Do you want to take a swag at, is that one device a phone, a tablet?
Oh, to me it's a phone. It's a phone.
So it's a small
yeah.
What was the
phone
quote? If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah. But if your hammer can turn into a mallet and a saw, you know,
Yeah, there you go.
and that's what these things are.
It's a
They're
magic
programmable. You can do all kinds of things with it. That's the magic of software, man. Oh, sorry, Bill Gates said that. The other part of it was the other part that I think is a huge lag at this point. And it kind of goes back to Abe's point. If you look at the great consumer applications we have today, enterprise is totally in the dark ages. You know, the stuff that I have to do to approve an expense or authorize a payment or a PO or make any kind of a submission to our IT systems is absolutely rude. So I'd like to see enterprise catch up to the point that consumer applications have and give us an experience that we can all be really happy with.
Cool, Claudia.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to take more of my customer-centric approach, I guess, and not that we haven't talked about customers, but look at it more from a content perspective and say that I'd love to see a world where we think about content experiences more than app experiences or, book experiences. I deal a lot with publishers, and I'm not blaming us as sort of the app industry for being focused on ourselves. I think we've evolved, and just looking at this conference 3 years ago from now, 3 years ago and now, look at how deep we're going into analytics and app usage and global evolution. I think that's wonderful. I just feel like I see a lot of silos, and when I look at customers, especially our customers that who are very non-technical people, they come into stores, they don't know anything about the technology, they have no idea what Android is or BlackBerry or anything, they just don't know. They just know they have a phone and they have a tablet and they like to read, or that's what they like to do if they're coming into our stores. For them, it's about the content consumption experience. How easy is it? How intuitive is it? And I think that's ultimately what leads people to want that one ideal device, right, to do everything in their life. So just kind of trying to break those silos and bring them together more would be really interesting. And it's something that we in the technology industry, I believe, need to take the leadership and do, because when I talk to book publishers, they're resistant and they're still behind in the world, and they're still trying to understand the benefits that technology will bring to them if they're a book publisher, to their readers. And so we have sort of a responsibility to try and move that forward and show them those benefits because it's right for the customer. So I think that's a really interesting concept.
Very good. I have like one more question, then I'm kind of out of questions, so please start thinking of questions. Fill the dead. But let's drill down a little bit more into HTML5. And actually, Ivan, maybe we'll have you talk a little about that. Lude is an HTML game development platform. So, right, is that roughly accurate?
As well.
Okay, tell us maybe how this world evolves. Gaming, especially on mobile devices, is, depending on what kind of gaming you're playing, it's still fairly native app centric for many cases. How does this move into an HTML5 world?
Well, HTML5 scene is generally more or less it is broken in mobile space. We all know that. Performance is not there, or touch problems, fragmentation, pretty much is not there. Clearly, the web's the winning platform. It's the only platform that is here to stay forever. All the other platforms are subject to change, evolve, disappear, whatever, but the web is supposed to be here forever, and it's evolving very rapidly. So on our side, gaming is something that is completely broken, so our firm is absolutely committed to make this work. What we do is fix several things. We deploy fast graphics, we fix the sound, but we also help games and applications as well, because we are not only game-centric. Applications as well to break the boundaries of a browser. A browser is a sandbox environment, and it doesn't offer you access to native features in a mobile space. For example, in-app purchases or push notifications, BlackBerry has the wrapper, which has more or less all these features exposed. But HTML5 by itself doesn't supply you with such features. They are not there. So there must be something must be done to address that. Gaming that way is completely broken, but it's catching up very rapidly. WebGL, fast graphics, whatever. The browser and the desktop, everything is fixed. In the mobile space, it's not. That's the main statement of our company, to bring the native experience to HTML5 in the mobile space, because it's not there. It will eventually be, but when 2 years from now, or in my company 6 months, is the long term, so we can't think ahead on time 2 years.
Is that the Holy Grail in gaming, to fix the mobile browsing experience in gaming? And I think, Chris, you had a comment last night. Is HTML5 the Holy Grail? If these guys can fix it in gaming and other folks can fix it in other applications, does it become the Holy Grail?
I think it's a pit stop along the way, right? I don't think there's an end point. I think, you could replace HTML5 with Java at the Wayback Machine. We were having this discussion on the ride up yesterday. I think as an industry, we have to coalesce around standards. Because if we don't, right, then, I mean, the ultimate fragmentation is everyone's doing something completely different, and no one's ecosystem thrives, or one or two do, and that's not good for anybody. So HTML5 is a great opportunity, and you see what the motivation is when you looked earlier at the data in terms of number of developers that are already trained in web technologies. It absolutely makes sense to coalesce around that. You know, what I found is all you need to do is tell engineers they can't do something, and 6 months later, guess what? The problem's solved. So, you know, I think if you look at where it's coming from, graphics was far away. You know, having worked in gaming before, they used to say, well, you can't game on a mobile phone, right? There's not enough performance in it. You gotta have a console or maybe a souped up PC, but nobody will ever do that kind of stuff on a phone. Now we're doing it and saying, oh, well, you can do it on a phone, but you gotta program it natively. You can't possibly do it in HTML5, right? It's just too slow and the tech isn't there. Maybe we'll solve that problem.
We
but,
have solved it.
Yeah. See, there you go. I said 6 months, it was 6 seconds.
We solved that as well, but for many different
Yeah.
platforms, even for yours.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, you know,
Right.
60 frame per second graphics
Yeah.
running inside a browser window, WebGL. I mean, you know, what I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you need?
There you go.
Yeah, I actually.
That's it.
believe-
Performance
You know.
is actually a fallacy when it comes to
What
HTML5. Bad implementations have bad performance, but you know.
Amen.
Right.
You know, some of you might have, you know, devices, you know, on your smartphones. If you go to fb.html5 is ready, we actually reproduced the Facebook application using HTML5, and I challenge you to tell the difference. So we actually believe that the experiences that are shipping in today's modern devices, even going back 2 years, you can create a very performant and engaging HTML5 experience. And I challenge you guys to go ahead and take a look for yourself. Go ahead.
Can I ask the first question?
Yeah.
So for me, in my basic sort of view of the world, there's a lot of discussion around HTML5 versus apps, and that confuses the hell out of me, because HTML5 is a language, and you know, apps is a container. So I would say, okay, then is it browser versus apps, and HTML5 versus something else, like native coding? Assuming it is HTML5 versus native coding, you know, why do developers really care? And I understand the point you're making of Holy Grail, it will work across, but as you mentioned, Chris, we discussed Java many years ago,
Yeah.
and that promise wasn't really fulfilled. So why should developers really care about it? In particular, and that will drive me to my second question just a bit, in particular in a world that maybe won't have a lot of operating systems that are at scale, right? Second question, why do we need a new operating system? Why do end users need a new operating system? If the world already has two at scale, let's see if Windows Phone gets anywhere, and we have a market of 3. Why do we actually need
Well,
it?
4, you got
From an end user perspective.
Five.
Five.
You forgot Tizen.
I mean, I was
6 Firefox.
I was,
Yeah.
I was involved in Symbian when there was
Right.
this thing that ended up with Nokia. Lyman
Yeah.
Foundation Mobile, and I had discussions with some of my clients whether they should adopt it or not. You know, so I've been involved in more operating systems that I'd be willing to probably admit.
Right.
Even WIPI and TPAC, trying to make it a global standard. So, but why do end users need it, right? Because it reminds me, and I'm not picking on Intel, I think you guys are
Right.
great, but it reminds me of the discussion I had on WiMAX. And why was WiMAX needed? And the first thing that came to mind is Qualcomm. And so, why do we actually need, you know, a new operating system from an end user perspective? So those two are my end users.
Yeah, I would say end users, well, end users do care, but they don't care in the tech. They care about the experience, right? Think about the discussion earlier this morning about the rise in in-app purchases and tying back to your carrier billing. That's really about making it easy for them to do what they want to do. If the current incumbents aren't allowing people to make money, the providers, the carriers, and the OEMs to make money in that environment, then they have to find another way, or they'll die. And then you'll end up with 2 companies making 2 phones, maybe plastic variants and those types of things. And that's not good for consumers because now they're going to be dictated. And in fact, it won't exist that way because, you know, the tech industry will rally against that. Someone will come up with another option, right? There was life before iPhone, and we actually did communicate, and you know, people did things. They came up and solved a problem that we didn't know we had, and that's how the industry evolves.
Can I offer a sort of a riff on that?
Yeah.
I think that the user experience piece is a really big deal. You know, our customer base is different from the iPhone customer base. They don't play as many games. They're more interested in productivity. The features that we've implemented around messaging and communication are quite different from what our competition are doing, and they fit very squarely into the customer demographic and the use cases we're trying to go after. Our customers care deeply about things like security. You know, the secure network that goes along with the BlackBerry network, and the built-in container model that separates applications that might monkey with things that are private data that the customer, you know, the corporation doesn't want. It separates those from corporate data. So I think that to think of the world as being a duopoly of two operating systems is to do customers a real disservice, because as the market becomes saturated, and we just saw somebody earlier this morning say that there was 101% saturation in the market, or 101% saturation in the US market, it's naturally going to split into many niches. It's naturally going to split into devices that are very particular to a particular customer demographic.
Also, from a carrier perspective, you know, our bread and butter is selling devices and plans that go with those devices. You know, one of the motivations behind Firefox for us is, you know, we can start lowering the price point of those devices. So the BOM cost of the device may not be massively different when it comes to a low-end Android and a Firefox device. But because those control points that exist on Android or iOS mean that Telefonica cannot partake in some of the revenue that occurs across other parts of the ecosystem, you know, we can't lower those price points. So with Firefox, and you know, it could be the same with other HTML5 based OSs. You know, Telefonica benefits from revenue from other pieces of the puzzle, so we can actually lower the price to the consumers for those devices. So in Venezuela, the press are calling Firefox OS the people's phone, because for the first time, these phones are at a price point that mean people have access to these devices, but they're not crappy feature phone experiences, they're actually smartphone experiences.
Well, I think Claudia's presentation really hit on why we need it, and why we need something like that. Because I mean, I love the truly personal and vertical approach that she takes to her customers, and I don't think she talked about the OS once today.
No, it doesn't matter to a customer.
This doesn't matter.
It's about the experience.
Well, it matters in the sense that if you have two large 8,000-pound gorillas that don't allow Claudia to innovate her products to meet her customer needs, then you've got those two tech companies dictating how you're going to teach your children.
Yeah.
And I'm much more comfortable with Claudia preparing that material than the guys I know down there. So,
you know, the other thing, you know, that I always try to point out is that, you know, everyone's talking about the race to 1 billion activations, you know, Android 900 million, something like that. But if you take Android, iOS, BlackBerry, you know, and all these other ecosystems that are out there, HTML5 has far surpassed 1 billion devices with activations on it, right? So the core technology of HTML5, it's here, it's already distributed across all these different devices, and it's the only ubiquitous client-side language. So if you take a look at Android, you take a look at Cocoa and Objective-C, those are client-side, Cascades, client-side technologies that developers have to learn in order to deploy their applications on those platforms. What HTML5 gives them is another client-side technology. It just so happens that it works across everything. So, you know, what are you going to bet on? And as a developer, and I think if you can go ahead and prove to developers, you know, we take our trust with our developer community very strongly, and we have 2 million developers on the platform that put a lot of trust in us. So we have to make sure that we take that trust and we can, you know, push the market forward. So we're working very closely with BlackBerry to give them very specific use cases that we feel that if they optimize for this particular use case, it separates BlackBerry from the rest. And we're doing the same with Tizen as well. So, you know, when you get down to it, if you're capable of, you know, leveling the playing field amongst the client-side libraries, Android, Objective-C, JavaScript, HTML5, as a developer, which one are you going to choose when you have all of these different platforms out there? And I think HTML5 is the only technology out there that is future-proofed to give them that reach. So for developers, I think it's very important that they have a technology that they can learn and they can develop for, that they know that's not going to be extinct 2 years from now. And I think that's what we bring to the table. Is, that level of confidence.
I guess the other piece to that is that HTML5 itself is it's a reasonably non-complex technology. There are a lot of developers that understand it, right? I was sitting with a bunch of banks in New York a month and a half ago, and just asking them questions about their development environments and what they cared about. BYOD means that they have to care about cross-platform, and the skill sets that they have in order to be able to program applications that are mobile applications are HTML5 and JavaScript, C#, because they're all Microsoft shops because they've all got Microsoft servers in there, and in some cases there's a smattering of iOS. They have no desire to go and staff up to be able to support multiple different platforms. Java's kind of a little bit on the wane at the moment in some of those places, especially as a mobile technology. So HTML5 is the answer that they're looking for.
Well, another thing is that HTML5 evolves based on developer requirements. It's not something that is closed, a closed environment, which is leveraged only based on the interest of one enterprise. It's something completely open, and everybody could push the envelope, proposing something which could be eventually included in the final specification of the evolution of the language, HTML5 and related technologies.
I think the real challenge, though, is the laggards, right?
Right.
The implementation is uneven. We're very proud of the high scores we've got for compliance, but the thing that we run into the most often is a developer who will build an application betting on the compliance level that we've got and try and run it on a competitor's platform, and it breaks because it's been implemented incorrectly on the other platforms.
Let's do one more question, then we're going to switch to the money panel. Who's got the best one in the house? Oh!
Not the best one, but
Okay, go for it, please.
It's kind of not as controversial, but I'm just curious.
All right, next question.
I've already tasted Chris Hall's wine, so I can sit and talk all night.
So obviously discovery is a big issue across all apps and everything. And Claudia, you talked about siloing and whether that's good or bad. Do you think it's going to be total data play that's going to end up being a viable solution for discoverability? Is it going to be siloing things and segmenting them that way? Do you have any thoughts on how the app discovery issue will be somewhat rectified? Not perfectly. No way.
It's all the internet. Context.
I think context is, is
Yeah.
the only thing that's, context.
It's context, it's personalization, it's the stuff that we haven't been using in the user experience. It's like Ivan had said, it's making this thing simple, right? It's got to be simple so you can use it. It's using big data in a way that's personalized to you. And all this discussion around HTML5, I'm a big believer in HTML5, as several of you know. But it's actually just making it so dead simple that when you have your device, it just doesn't know where you are, but it knows who you are.
So going back to the context thing, I don't use the App Store search to find apps. I use a search engine. So, and that's how I find things. Because ultimately, if I type in even the exact name of the App Store, sometimes I come up with
Nothing.
no, I didn't.
Well,
want
type
that.
in Facebook
Right.
and you'll see totally unrelated.
So-
The average
It's- yeah,
sophistication of it. You're not the average sophistication of
The
user. Most
typical-
users aren't that
Sure,
sophisticated.
but I'll
Yeah.
go Google, to-do app for iOS or something like that. So.
What's really interesting is we have Google Play on our devices now, right? And some people would have said that would have impacted my business in selling apps to my customers. But what's interesting is we still get our booksellers emailing me daily asking me why we don't have a certain app in our store. And I laugh and I say, well, it's on Google Play. Why isn't the customer going to Google Play to find it on the device? Our customer can't be bothered. That is not the way they discover apps, not the way they search for apps. Even if you have the name of an app, you can't find it. They want that personalized experience directly to them. They want that simplicity. right? So like, that's what it boils down to. So like my team knows that they have to do the best job possible to make customers discover the apps that they're looking for. To me, it is all about context and personalization.
And how are you choosing that context? Like, how are you
We have
choosing
a very
things?
powerful merchandising engine that we built, talking about big data, that our cloud team has built, that my team uses as a tool, and it's really extensive. And it brings in all of, the customer searches as well as recommendations, our booksellers, expertise. It all merges into one, and my team actually, we manually curate. And it's impossible, but our tools help us scale.